The first blackout struck Meridian City on a clear Tuesday morning, less than 3 minutes after the mayor delivered the quarterly promise that the aging grid would be modernized soon. At 10:14 a.m., every bulb, traffic light, elevator, and phone screen went dark. 7 minutes later, the LEDs flickered back to life, followed by a surge of car horns, shouts, and frantic phone calls from citizens who insisted they had just spent those 7 minutes living in someone else's skin. Within a week, the media had coined a term, the flicker. The power company insisted it had nothing to do with them. The police commissioner blamed hackers. Conspiracy boards filled with speculation about cosmic radiation, secret government tests, and divine pranks. But no one, official or amateur, could explain why each outage lasted exactly 7 minutes, or why consciousnesses swapped bodies during that darkness and then reverted at the instant the power returned. Mara Chin, transit operations dispatcher, experienced her first flicker on day 4. One moment she was at her workstation buried beneath screens showing buses inching along mid-morning traffic. The next, she was sitting in a wheelchair in a room that smelled faintly of antiseptic and lemon polish. A frail left hand, mottled with liver spots, rested on the arm of the chair. When she tried to stand, the borrowed knees buckled. She caught sight of her reflection in a wall-mount television. The face of an elderly Asian man with cataract-clued eyes stared back. Panic bubbled in her throat. "Don't be scared," a familiar yet disembodied voice whispered. Her own voice, she realized. 30 more seconds. She turned toward the room's single window. Fluorescent hallway lights had gone out, but beyond the building glass, Meridian's towers were black silhouettes against the sky. Somewhere an emergency generator growled to life. Then, like a film splice, she was back at her desk, headset askew, the transit screens flickering. A half-started sentence hung on her lips. Around her, the operations floor erupted. Karen, who usually withheld her opinions about anything not related to bus schedules, announced she'd spent the blackout in the body of a teenager doing skateboard tricks on Fifth Avenue. Sean, the stoic night shift guy, insisted with shaking hands that he'd been trapped in a delivery driver's van while the man's consciousness occupied Sean's seat across the room. After work, Mara took the long way home, partly to avoid the news crews staking out City Hall, and partly to chew on the implications of spending 7 unauthorized minutes in someone else's body. She found herself wondering whether the elderly man, whoever he was, remembered borrowing hers. The next flicker occurred at midnight, 5 days later. Meridian, already edgy, plunged into instant disarray. For those 7 minutes, Mara found herself sprinting barefoot along the river esplanade, lungs burning, the body lean and fast male, early 20s, too little body fat, too much adrenaline. She cradled something in her borrowed right hand, a velvet ring box. In the quiet blackout, she could hear her footsteps slapping the pavement and the shaky mantra repeating in his mind. Don't let her say no. Don't let her say no. Back in her own apartment, Mara shot upright in bed as power returned, ring box gone, heart galloping like she'd run the distance herself. She scoured the internet for anything that resembled data collection rather than rumor. Amid cat memes and apocalyptic forecasts, she spotted a forum thread titled, 7-Minute Club Verify Your Swaps Here. Most of the posts were junk, was a cat, or aliens are real. But buried on page 3, user M_actual had started a spreadsheet. Date, time, location, age estimate, and experiences described. Hundreds of entries populated the sheet. Dozens more appeared after each new flicker. Mara created a username, Transit M, and typed Day 7. Swapped into 20-something male running near Riverside Amphitheater, holding ring box, anyone match. Within an hour she had a reply, user, Luis M. Yeah, Day 7 0:00. Swapped into 30-something male asleep in studio app near Hill District. Wrist tattoo. Breathed. That you? Mara's heart stuttered. She did have that tattoo, invisible unless she pushed up her sleeve. She wrote back, confirmed, that was me. Want to talk? They arranged to meet at dusk in a public cafe where both could verify faces and bail if things felt off. Mara arrived early and claimed a booth. The man who slid in opposite her wore a detective's badge on his belt and carried himself like someone who'd rather stand against a wall than sit exposed in vinyl upholstery. "Luis Moreno," he said, offering a hand. She shook it. "I figured you were a cop. Homicide, actually, though lately we're all flicker detail between murders." He managed a wry half-smile. "You're the dispatcher I borrowed?" "I am. You ran 5 blocks in bare feet and almost gave me a heart attack." "That proposal was supposed to happen that night," he muttered. "I'd stashed the ring under a park bench while I set up candles. Power cut and suddenly I was you." Mara sipped her coffee. "Did she say yes?" "Eventually," I explained. He shrugged. "Hard to plan romance around a metaphysical glitch." They compared notes. Both had experienced 2 swaps, both lasting 7 minutes to the second. Neither could recall any sensation of electrical current or shock preceding the switches. The only common denominator seemed to be proximity. The detective's research suggested most swaps occurred within 5 miles, though there were outliers. Louise leaned in. "We've had 3 homicides during flickers, each victim killed while inhabiting a stranger's body, which means our suspect list includes 2 people, the killer's consciousness and the body he used. Good luck narrowing that." Mara toyed with a sugar packet. "What do you need? A way to predict the next outage?" She whistled softly. "You and the rest of the city." Yet once the idea lodged in her mind, it refused to leave. Back at transit headquarters, the server logs revealed second-by-second power fluctuations. She compiled timestamps of the 6 known flickers and fed them into a plot. The intervals formed no obvious pattern: 38 hours, then 119, 17, 65, 56, 103. Random enough to defy straightforward timing models. Still, she overlaid grid load charts, solar flare records, and barometric pressure table. No match. At 2:00 IEM. She closed her laptop, rubbed her eyes, and called Louise. Nothing yet. But if the grid is the trigger, we'd expect a spike right before each failure, yes? Unless something else triggers both. "What if the people trigger it?" she murmured. "What if someone like you and I reach some critical number of overlapping thoughts or, hell, brainwaves? The grid fails as a side effect." "That's above my pay grade," Louise admitted. "But there's one pattern we do know. The murders happen during flickers, and whoever's doing them knows exactly whose body they'll be in. Meaning the killer could predict outages. An unsettling notion." 2 nights later, the 7th flicker hit. Mara had left her office after midnight, walking home through the warehouse district, phone flashlight guiding her around potholes. The world blinked out. She stumbled, then felt wind lash her face. She was airborne, seated behind the controls of a small helicopter bobbing over the harbor. Her hands, not hers, but broad and calloused, gripped the cyclic stick. Lights on the console were dead. Outside, Meridian was nothing but a quilt of black squares. Static crackled in her borrowed headset. A man's voice barked, "Miller? Miller, talk to me!" Her stomach lurched. She had maybe 6 minutes left, 0 training in aviation, and a machine losing altitude. She yanked the headset microphone close. "Not Miller. Look, I'm someone else, and I don't know how to fly." "Christ," the voice cursed, then spoke with forced calm. "Hold steady. Don't fight the pedals." Below, dockyard cranes rose like skeletal fingers. The rotor wash screamed in her ears. She obeyed instructions. Level the pitch, touch nothing else. For those eternal minutes, she listened to the stranger guide her. Flare, nose up, skids down. The chopper shuddered onto an abandoned pier. A jolt rattled teeth that weren't hers, and then the blackout ended, returning her to her own body, flat on her apartment's couch, TV blaring reruns. She bolted upright, still tasting engine oil on a tongue no longer in her mouth. Louise's call came seconds later. "You okay?" "Yes," she panted. "Where were you?" "In the middle of a traffic stop. Driver's body anyway." "I saw the harbor. Police scanner says a news chopper landed hard on Pier 12. No casualties." They met at the hospital where the pilot, real name Sandra Miller, was undergoing observation for shock. Mara, claiming to be a witness, slipped into the waiting area. When Sandra emerged, groggy but alert, Mara stepped forward. "We shared a cockpit." she said softly. Recognition dawned in Sandra's eyes. You were terrified. I still am. Mara introduced Luis. Together they pried from Sandra an important detail. She'd received an anonymous text 2 hours before takeoff. Only you can land in the dark. Ready. The number was untraceable. Luis confiscated the phone for evidence. A murderer texts advice. Mara rubbed her arms. Or instructions. The 8th flicker arrived quicker less than 24 hours later, catching the city mid-afternoon. Mara found herself on stage at the Meridian Symphony Hall, violin tucked beneath her chin. She recognized the liver-spotted hands and nearly laughed, the same elderly body from her first swap. The auditorium lights were out, but emergency aisle markers glowed faint green. The conductor, somewhere off stage, hissed, "Elias, keep playing." She drew the bow across strings she'd never practiced. Miraculously, muscle memory guided her. The old man's fingers waltzed through a cadenza so exquisite, Mara forgot the apocalypse outside. 6 minutes later came the final fermata. At 7, the blackout ended. Back in her own skin, tears blurred her vision. She'd tasted a lifetime of artistry. She needed to meet Elias. She messaged the forum. Transit man seeking violinist Elias. He replied within an hour. They arranged coffee. Elias Park was 82, his hands still trembling from the performance. I haven't played that solo publicly in a decade, he said. The power cut. My bow hit the string, and I knew someone was with me. You guided my hands. She laughed. I thought you guided mine. The idea struck then. Maybe the flicker merged skill sets. She called Luis. What if someone's orchestrating swaps to leverage people's talents? Pilot plus anonymous tip equals safe helicopter landing. Musician plus me equals impromptu performance. Killer plus, well, killer. And what do they gain? Luis asked. I don't know. But they're nudging outcomes. That night, Mara's spreadsheet chimed with a new private message. From user Null, a handle she hadn't seen. The text read, if you want answers, wait for the dark. Bring the detective. 4736, 18N, 12220, 34 well. GPS put the coordinates at Meridian's grid control station, an aging substation on the waterfront slated for demolition. She forwarded the message to Luis, whose captain insisted it was a trap, yet authorized backup. At 1:10, they arrived in 2 unmarked cruisers. Engineers had vacated for the night. Only sodium floodlights hummed over chain-link fences. Luis glanced at his phone. If a flicker happens, we'll be blind and swapped inside enemy territory. Exactly what Null wants. Mara's pulse hammered. They entered the control center. Banks of analog panels blinked steady green. Cooling fans whirred. In the middle corridor stood a figure mid-30s, denim jacket, army haircut, holding a tablet. He raised a palm, placating. I'm not armed. Name's Arlen Dane. I built this. He tapped the tablet. Luis kept his hand near his holster. You caused the flickers? Arlen smiled. I prefer demonstrations. Energy and consciousness. 2 sides of the same currency. I proved it. He gestured to the console. The city grid's frequency is a tuning fork. Nudge it, and every brain near it sings the same note, swaps bodies until the resonance collapses. Mara stepped forward, half believing, half horrified. People are dying. Only because some rock shelters snakes, Arlen replied. I broadcast opportunity. Human nature fills the blanks. Luis stiffened. You texted the murderer. I texted anyone whose neural pattern fit the equation. Heroes, lovers, killers. I gave them a stage. You need to shut it down, Mara said, voice trembling. Arlen's calm flickered. Why would I kill paradise? For 7 minutes strangers walk in strangers' souls. Prejudice evaporates. Skill transcends flesh. Then swap with me now, Mara challenged. Look through my eyes without blackouts or casualties. Arlen's gaze softened. I wish I could. My tech requires the city's grid load. He turned to a master switch encased in plexiglass. Tonight, I'll ramp amplitude. Permanent integration. No switchback. Luis drew his weapon. Step away. Arlen sighed. Detective, You of all people should appreciate inhabiting a killer's mind to stop him. Imagine the crimes you could prevent if you felt them being conceived. Mara shouted. Lower the gun, Luis. Too late, Arlen punched a code. Overhead lights died. A siren whooped once and cut. Absolute dark swallowed them. Her equilibrium spun. But unlike earlier flickers, consciousness did not launch into another body. Instead, she felt everyone. Dozens of heartbeats, memories, cravings mixing like radio channels, scanning too fast to latch. Her mind splintered, yet she anchored to one frequency, Luis's terror. She reached through black space toward it, screaming his name wordlessly. Thought collided with thought. She glimpsed his memory of the first homicide. A flicker, a borrowed scalpel, arterial spray. He had never told her how that scene haunted him. She flinched, then pulled him close in the mental swirl. Somewhere, Arlen exulted. His voice was thunder in all minds. See the Union! This is our new dawn! But he had miscalculated. Tens of thousands of Meridian citizens collided in shared awareness, and the weight of their collective will turned against the single architect. Mara felt it like a tide reversing, surging toward Arlen's node. Panic laced his triumphant roar. Stop, he begged across the network. You'll tear us apart. Mara and Luis, together in thought, pushed. Overload rippled back into the substation circuits. Breakers blew like shotguns. Sparks cascaded. The darkness thickened but emptied. Minds slid back into solitude. Mara felt the clean snap of separation as she returned wholly to herself. Emergency generators kicked in. Red hazard lights pulsed. Arlen lay crumpled beside the console, tablet shattered, hair singed. Smoke curled from a fried transformer. Luis holstered his pistol, knelt and checked for a pulse. Alive, barely. Outside, sirens wailed. Police, fire, ambulance. Mara leaned against a wall, lungs dragging air that suddenly felt heavier, older. Hours later, after statements and medical checks, she and Luis sat on the hood of a cruiser, watching dawn pastel the horizon. News crews swarmed behind barricades. Arlen's rig is slag, Luis said quietly. City grid experts swear the damage can't be fixed soon. They're replacing the whole system. Mara exhaled. No grid, no tuning fork. Flickers should be over. He paused. Unless someone rebuilds it. She closed her eyes. In the blackout union, she'd tasted what Arlen yearned for. Empathy. Unfiltered. A terrible, astonishing thing. A tool and a weapon in the same breath. She opened her eyes and found Luis watching her. We keep each other honest, he said, as if reading her thought. We do. Coffee? God, yes. They stood. Across the river Meridian skyline glittered in ordinary daylight, traffic lights cycling, elevators humming, citizens gratefully trapped inside their own skins. Yet Mara couldn't shake the memory of an 82-year-old violinist's graceful fingers or the terrified lift of a helicopter over dark water. 7 minutes had given her 1,000 lives, and they would live inside her forever. As she and Luis walked toward the nearest open cafe, she felt for the first time that the city's power and its people might finally stay where they belonged. But should another blackout come, she knew exactly whose hand she would reach for in the dark.